month, JFYNetWorks continues our conversation with Hubie Jones. Hubie has not only witnessed Boston history for 67 years, he has also shaped and defined the civic and social landscape. He has been a leader in the formation of at least 30 community organizations in neighborhoods across the city, most recently Higher Ground and the Boston's Children's Chorus. In 1967, as director of the Roxbury Multi-Service Center, Hubie headed a formal investigation and published a report that led to the enactments of two landmark state laws, the Special Education Law and the Bilingual Education Law, protecting the rights to educational equity for two vulnerable groups. In this podcast, you'll hear about the reaction to the recommendation for Boston to go from an elected school committee to one appointed by the mayor.
Now, I got a lot of grief from a lot of folks in the black community saying, "You've taken away our vote. You've taken away our vote. And you don't even live in Boston. And you've taken away our vote." So I said, I didn't take away your vote. I said, the electorate who voted took away your vote.
How the appointed school committee rocked the Boston political world.
Louise Day Hicks and her crowd had basically promised their constituents in the white neighborhoods of Boston, if you stick with us, you continue to vote for us, you will not have to worry about your kids going to school with black kids. Well, that promise was broken.
And how the Chicago Children's Chorus provided the model to form a similar group here in Boston.
And I said, oh my goodness, this is the model I've been looking for. Because I've tried to find ways to integrate kids across the divides of race, ethnicity, social class, sexual orientation, and not very successful. And I said, this looks like the model.
This podcast was created by JFYNetWorks, a Boston-based nonprofit provider of online learning resources, training, and support. JFY's College and Career Readiness provides focused blended learning programs in middle and high school to help students reach grade-level standards and build the academic skills they need to succeed in college or technical training and enter careers. For JFYNetWorks, I'm Greg Cunningham. Hubie Jones has been an influential activist and leader in Boston civic affairs since his arrival from New York in 1955. In this second conversation with JFY's executive director, Gary Kaplan, Hubie recounted his involvements in politics, education, and civil rights through the decades, beginning with the election of Ray Flynn as mayor of Boston.
How about if we start with the election is on, okay, it's Ray Flynn, it's not going to be Mel, it's going to be Ray Flynn. Where are you at this point? I assume that you supported Mel during the election.
Yes.
So, all right. So here we are. It's 1980. It's 1983. The election. It's whatever. November, whatever. The election is over. What did you, when you got up the next day, what were you thinking?
Well, here we go again. Our chance to have a black mayor is down the tubes. We have a new mayor who, based upon what had happened with Melkin winning and his Rainbow Coalition, understood he had to have a new kind of politics. And he had to really now be a populist, and whatever that meant. It meant certainly having moved from where the South Boston crowd was, right? So he was going to be more populist. He appointed a number of black folks to high positions in his administration. He went about trying to fix some problems. Did
you know him at all?
Did I know him at all? Yes, I knew him in this sense. No, I really got to know him after he became mayor, because my family, from across the country, had a family reunion here in Boston, and I was the host for this family reunion. We had one every year, different parts of the country, and they finally decided it's time to come to Boston. So I called him up and I said, Ray, would you be willing to welcome my family to Boston at the start of the family reunion?
Is this 1984? He's in office now?
He's in office.
Yeah.
He's in office. And I said, he said, yeah, I said, it's on a Saturday, so you'd have to open up City Hall. He said, fine, no, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy to do it. So my family of, I don't know how, there must have been at least 40 people who showed up in his office, and he welcomed my family to Boston.
No kidding.
And he went saying, I just want you all to know what an important leader Hubie is. And it's just wonderful that you're here. And we treasure this guy.
Wow.
So he had with him a book, one of his books that he signed over to my mother, who was there, and he gave her the book, and that book sat in her front hall in the Bronx for everybody to see. This was given to me by the mayor of Boston. So somehow that made a connection. He made a connection with her. And every time I would see him on business, he'd say, how's your mom? How's your mother doing? I said, well, she still has your book right in her front hall. She's very proud of it. He said, oh, that's wonderful. She's a wonderful lady. I really enjoyed meeting her. And eventually he would ask me, about, well, how's your mother doing? I said, she died. And he said, oh my goodness, I'm sorry to hear that. She was such a wonderful lady. Okay. So I had this kind of personal connection, okay, with him introducing my family, my broad family, to the Boston environment. So that was kind of a personal thing. Then he ultimately comes and asked me to be the chair of this new education reform committee that he's putting together. I did it with some trepidation because I wasn't clear about where he was going and what this was about. But obviously, you know my track record on trying to get reform in Boston schools. And Ellen Guiney was working for him. And she came and put the arm on me, asking me to do it. And I didn't know that underneath all of this was an interest in moving the school committee from an elected committee to a appointed one.
You didn't know about that agenda at that point?
Did not know about that agenda.
Let me ask a question. Do you know where that idea came from?
I really don't know. I do know that we had a very good group of people on this committee. We were very well staffed, and the idea was raised. I can't remember how. What would it? We were all saying that basically the current school committee is not doing its job. Even the Black members of the committee were not doing their job. Everybody was just trying very hard to get reelected. So it was basically about raising money for your campaign, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was putrid, and it was going nowhere. So the idea came up: what would happen if we tried to move this from an elected school committee to an appointed school committee? Well, we did send this team of people to go do research around the country to find out what had happened when school committees went from elected to appointed, or from appointed to elected. And he basically came back with the information that this was a cyclical deal. At some point, you change, you make a change, and then probably within 15 to 20 years, that school committee would not be effective for whatever reason, and you'd go back to where you were. And so when I went along with this finally and said, because I was through with the elected school committee because they were just not doing their job. And I said, okay, I voted that we recommend to the mayor that there be a referendum where people would vote on whether to do this or not. Because the mayor did not have the power to just do it. He had to have a referendum and get the consent of the electorate. So a referendum was taken, and the vote was to go to the elected school committee. Now, obviously, that is always a very risky thing, because it depends upon who is the mayor. And if the mayor is not smart, or the mayor is not honest or authentic or whatever, you can be in trouble. You can be in trouble. So basically, the bottom line is you're giving a lot of power to the mayor in terms of the running and stewardship of the schools. Okay? Now, I got a lot of grief from a lot of folks in the Black community saying, you've taken away our vote. You've taken away our vote. And you don't even live in Boston. And you've taken away our vote. Now, so I said, I didn't take away your vote. I said, the electorate who voted took away your vote. That's who decided to take away your vote. So that was a major thing to happen. But I always knew that at some point in time, it would not be working, probably. Mm-hmm. And the electorate would say, we want to change. I think we're at this moment now where there seems to be a lot of political capital and support for going back to the elected school committee. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
But you said at the time, people were saying it was a 20-year cycle?
Yeah, about 20 years. 15,
and this is about 40 years.
40, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this is twice.
So that's one of the ways in which I got to know the mayor. Now, I knew from the get-go that he was a big devotee of Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
Yeah, very big devotee of Bill Clinton. In 1987, when I was dean of the School of Social Work, and we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the school, I held a major seminar where about almost 1,000 people showed up, but I invited Bill Clinton to speak. I didn't know who he was, really who he was. I was trying to get Cuomo to be the speaker, and that didn't go anywhere. Hamlet on the Hudson kept telling me yes, no, yes, no, yes. And I finally said, I got to cut loose. And one of my staff people at the School of Social Work, Don Polk, said, well, why don't you go after Bill Clinton? I just heard him speak at the Urban League convention, in Houston. He said, he was fantastic.
Which staff member was that? Which staff member was
Donald Polk.
Don Polk,
who at some point became head of the Urban League in Boston. And so I said, Bill Clinton, this guy from this southern state, like, why the hell why would I do that? So I was desperate. So I started going after him to try to get him to come. And Ray heard about this and said, hey, if you get Bill Clinton to come, I want to be there. I said, really? Oh yeah, this guy's the real deal. I said, oh, okay, yeah, okay. So anyway, you know what? Like these politicians, they don't make a real commitment until they know for sure. So Harvard invited him to speak the day before we wanted him, and since Harvard wanted him, he came. And then the next day, he came to speak at our big forum. So I called up Ray Flynn. I said, hey, Ray, here we got it. Will you come and sit on the stage with me? And he did. And while we were sitting on the stage before Bill Clinton spoke, he leans over to me and says, this guy's going to become president of the United States. I said, oh, Ray, come on. I mean, he said, no, I'm telling you, this guy's going to be president of the United States. So eventually, Clinton, after he's made president, decides to make him the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican.
Which Ray had lobbied for tirelessly, right? He had lobbied for something. In fact, didn't he? He wanted to be Secretary of HUD, didn't he?
That's right. Right. Yes, this was a consolation prize.
Yeah.
That's what this was.
Which he wouldn't have gotten if he hadn't camped out on Clinton's doorstep for months.
Exactly.
Waving that umbrella. Yeah.
But clearly he wanted to go.
He wanted at that point. Did he want to get out of Boston, Ray?
I think he didn't. He wanted to get out of the mayor's job. He had enough. And you couldn't do that unless you had a high profile reason for going. And he pumped up the whole thing. This was like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it wasn't. He did the job fairly well, but like happens in Boston, when he came back to Boston, he couldn't get a job. In Boston, once you're out of power, you're dead. Once you're out of power, you're dead. He was a real example of that. He wanted a major job at Northeastern. They wouldn't give it to him. Yeah, they wouldn't give it to him. And running the athletic thing over there, they wouldn't give it to him. And he couldn't get any major job in Boston. And that's what happens to most people in Boston once they are out of power.
But Kevin was able to get his sinecure at BU. And
well, he paid for it in many ways.
Yeah.
He played a major role in BU getting the major building over there. So anyway, that's what happened. That's what happened to Ray, and he had to then work for a small Catholic organization, South Boston. Okay, that had no heft, no power,
no juice,
no juice.
So meanwhile, back on the education reform committee that he put you on back at the beginning, where did that go?
I think once the decision was made to spend all of the energy to get the referendum passed, and it did get passed, it went out of business. It went out of business.
Did it issue a report? There's this.
Oh yeah,
one. There's this one that you did later.
Oh yeah. But there was a report.
There was a report.
It was a report.
But the only thing that actually came out of it was the committee, the new committee.
Yeah, and it was a big decision.
Well, that was huge.
And we're still dealing with the outcome of all of it.
Indeed. So, meanwhile, during that period, you discovered that Ray was a decent guy and was, honest. And the idea that it took this white guy from Southie to shift the politics to a less vitriolic racial confrontation, it certainly reminded me of Cairo's stories about Lyndon Johnson, that it took a white Southerner to get a civil rights bill through. Was that the case here, that it took a white guy from South Boston to change the tenor of politics in Boston?
I think yes, although the big thing that happened, as you know, is that when Garrity ruled that the schools were de jure segregated and ordered a busing remedy, all hell broke loose. Louise Day Hicks and her crowd had basically promised their constituents in the white neighborhoods of Boston, if you stick with us, you continue to vote for us, you will not have to worry about your kids going to school with black kids. Well, that promise was broken. That promise was broken. At that point, Louise Day Hicks and that whole crowd could not get elected to anything again. They were through. And that was the beginning of moving the politics in the city in a more moderate direction.
Yeah. So that's 1974, 75.
So when I talked about it in 77, maybe in speeches, the politics in the city is moderating. It's moving away from where we were. And it's going to continue to move. People said, what are you talking about? You've got to be crazy. People couldn't see it. People couldn't understand. And then, of course, by 1983, here you have Mel King, a major figure in the mayor's race. That was the beginning of moving us in a different direction. And now we see where we are with an Asian mayor, a city council with mostly folks of color and women that I thought I'd never live to see, because when I got here in 1955, it was an Irish Catholic boys club, the city council.
Yeah. And
Dapper O'Neill was doing his racist stuff all over the place and using the N-word.
But the good thing about Dapper is he wasn't just vitriolic about black people. He was vitriolic about Asians,
Oh yeah.
Hispanics. I mean, he was an equal opportunity racist.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we moved along. So we have moved a long way.
Yeah. Let me ask the question about the mayor's race. In all of those races, starting with 1983, the black vote, maybe not starting with 1980, starting with the next one, there were multiple black candidates, and many people said you guys should decide who's going to be the candidate, and then you might have a chance to win. If there's one black candidate with a population of about 24%, you have a chance. But if you split the black vote among two or three candidates, you're just going to split the vote and you're not going to get there. And it has turned out that way in every one of those subsequent elections. Do you think that position, that deciding on one single candidate would make a difference?
Well, John O'Brien played a major role in forming this citizen committee. I forgot the name of it right now, where people who were wanting to run for office had to come before the committee to get their support. And if you didn't get their support, the likelihood was that you wouldn't do well. Even white candidates running for statewide office, etc., came before this committee to get the support of the black community. So this was an attempt to do something about this, so that there was a real thoughtful conversation about who should be really running. You couldn't stop people from running, but you could probably, if they didn't get the endorsement of this group, have a chance of winning. Had some potential power. Had some potential power. And at least members of the white community, politicians, thought they did have so much that they came before the committee trying to get their support. So there was an attempt to do that. Now, when I ran for Congress in 1972, David Nelson, who ultimately became a federal judge, black, little Catholic, etc. I played a major role in his campaign in 1970. When I ran in 72 and I was beginning my campaign, David Nelson said to me, "Hubie, I want you to be clear that when you start your campaign, you are not going to get liftoff.
You're not going to get what?
Liftoff.
Oh, yeah.
You're not going to get liftoff unless you go and get prominent white people to sign on to you. In other words, you've got to be anointed by prominent white folks to be taken seriously by the black community." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What are you talking about? That's awful. That's awful." He says, "Well, that's what I did. That's how I got liftoff. That's how I almost became a congressman." Okay, because I initially did not have to deal with all of the competitive nonsense in the black community. Once the black community knew I had tremendous support from prominent people outside of the community who were white, I was taken seriously. I was taken seriously. So when I began my campaign, I started having my campaign parties in Canton, in Needham, all in the white sections of the community. And it worked. I got over and people started saying, taking me seriously, because I was in a real fight between Mel Miller, who ran the Bay State Banner, and me. I tried to get him out. I tried to get him out of the campaign by having a community event where we would both come before the community, and the community would decide which one of us would run and really get serious community support. Well, he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. So he wouldn't be a part of it. The thing happened anyway, and I got obviously tremendous support. So it ended up that this division between him and me split leaders in the community. So that even though I ended up winning the lion's share of the votes in the black community, and also because of the rain and people didn't turn out, I could not prevail. Now the good news is that I lost, and I if I had won, I probably would have been divorced because being a father of 8 kids and a U.S. congressman is not the thing to do. Okay? I was not really listening to my wife, who was being a good soldier around all of this. But anyway, so that's part of the dynamics. Now this time around, you had substantial Black candidates running.
You had Andrea and Kim.
That's exactly. They just got outworked by Michelle Wu across the community. Okay, when I talk about the Rainbow Coalition, she went into all of these communities and made headway.
And Andrea and Kim did not do that?
Not to the extent that she did. And she did it early on. And by the time they realized what she had done, it was too late.
Okay, so getting back, let's just go back. So Ray Flynn and some progress is made, and then Tom Menino takes over. But wait a minute. There's one other. You had a discussion at one point with Ray about becoming superintendent of the Boston Public Schools.
Yep.
Do you want to expand on that?
I don't know how really serious he was, but he doesn't play around. He doesn't play games. But I wasn't really interested in doing that. One is I was not a educator in a deep sense of public education. I was a leader, and my background obviously is social work. I'm a social worker. Do I know enough about education thoroughly? My wife would say, who is an educator, would say no. Okay. Okay. But anyway, I just tested him out by saying, so what happens if it's a teacher strike? What would you do? He gave me the wrong answer. And I said, well, that gave me goodbye. I see you later.
So then Tom Menino takes over. You made a comment last time that there were some problems with Menino regarding the schools and the now appointed school committee. Do you want to go into any of that? Menino was there for how long? 20 years, was it?
20 years.
Yeah. That's kind of a long time.
A long time.
Do you think he did well by the schools?
No. No. Look, Menino was a very difficult guy. And when he made the decision about what should be done, and if you went against that decision, he would absolutely try to retaliate. In some cases, we found out he tried to take people's jobs who disagreed with him or said things he thought they should get a payback for. And of course, when he was caught, he would say, I had nothing. That's absolutely not true. So and I had a couple of experiences with him where I took him on. He could not take my job. There was nothing he could do to hurt me. So he ended up by saying, well, Hubie Jones is a good guy. He does a lot of good stuff for the city. Maybe he's my conscience. And he'd leave it at that. But if he could have hurt me, he probably would have, because he was a guy who would retaliate.
What specific issues did you lock horns with him about?
Well, some of it was around who should be the next superintendent.
Yeah.
When they hired Faison, he was clear that he wanted Faison, and he basically went and got Faison to agree to come. And all of the business of the search committee was a lot of nonsense, because people were thinking this was an open, really search, but he wanted Faison, and that's how it was going to be. So I took umbrage with the fact that he was playing games, using his power. He was going to have the superintendent he wanted, no matter what anybody said. Phony search process, wasting people's time, and all of this, and getting parents all involved. But he already had his superintendent because he had the juice that he wanted.
And basically. He had the appointed school committee.
That's right, and he had appointed school committees.
Yes.
Yeah. So he had it. So I said some things that he didn't like, and he basically had to just say, "Well, I can't do anything about it, and I can't retaliate. I can't take his job." Blah 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 blah. But this was a guy who he was not a visionary. Okay, he had no big thinking about how to move the city ahead in imaginary ways. Okay, imaginary ways. When we started the City to City program in 1997, Paul Guzzi and I went to see him about the idea. to take a group of Boston leaders, 40 to 50 in number, to another city in the country or abroad to learn best practices and to figure out how to seize opportunities that were here in Boston for the taking. And so he signed on to do this. And Paul said to me, "Well, if Menino says he'll sign on, I'll be a partner with you in doing it." So he started coming to, he went to Atlanta, he went to Seattle, but when he would get there, he would poo-poo what he saw. "Oh, this isn't great. We do it better in Boston." He couldn't listen. He was a wet blanket. So that when we got into these reflection sessions to think deeply about what is it we're seeing, what value does it have? Does it have any value for Boston? How would we be able to implement something like this? He would say, no. And when we decided to go to Philadelphia, he said, "That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Who would want to go to Philadelphia? That podunk tongue. Count me out." And I said, "Good, I'm glad you're not coming anymore, because you're just a wet blanket. Because you can't think about anything we're seeing in helpful ways." And that's his small mind thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. That would absolutely drive me crazy. At one point we said, this thing is going very well. We should be inviting in some of the nearby mayors from other cities, like Somerville, etc. He said, "I don't want that. I don't want anybody I just want Boston leaders. I don't want anybody from any other city. If you do that, I'm out of here." Okay. Well, when you come right down to it, we were having delegations coming to Boston, and they were regional leaders, because you can't solve city problems unless you're dealing with the regional realities.
Right.
Okay, you can't solve them within the boundaries of Boston, and these other cities who were coming in, and I presented to many of them. They understood that you didn't get your city problems solved without a regional focus. So he couldn't deal with that piece. So ultimately, he checked out altogether. And that was just a part of the way he was an urban mechanic.
Well,
okay?
he called himself that. Yeah.
He was. He was into retail politics. He fixed your potholes. He got your traffic light. He did that quick as you could. He understood that. He understood retail politics, and he did it. And it worked. The other thing about Menino is, I don't know how he did it. He went to every community meeting that existed, sometimes 3 or 4 a night. So community groups of all kinds appreciated his support. Okay, and that's how he did it. That's how he became so popular and powerful. Okay.
There was that remark, that famous remark that more than half of the people in Boston had met him personally.
Yeah, I bet you.
Yeah.
This guy was out every night, 6 days a week, if not Sunday too. Okay, and he just built this tremendous relationship with the electorate.
Hubie, going back to the Tom Payzant business, you didn't necessarily want Payzant, right? Or you were just not happy with the process, but you ended up serving on this committee and doing this report. So somehow he got you on board. How did that occur?
No, this report was done when he announced that he was not going to run again. So this was a report which was to try to set an agenda for the next superintendent. Now, one of the organizations I put together was called Critical Friends when Payzant was superintendent. And Critical Friends was basically people who were friends but we were critical. We would do things to be helpful, but we also would do things say things that needed to be said for the school system to get into the right place. So we were known as Critical Friends. And we had a group of folks that met on a regular basis. Whether he liked Critical Friends or not, he had to deal with us. But my problem with Pesant is that he didn't have a sense of urgency regarding change. He didn't have a sense of urgency. And the fact that he got an award, the award from the school under his watch, got the best school, one of the best schools in America award.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the guy from California, I forgot his name.
Broad.
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 Yeah.
You got a Broad award, okay?
Yeah.
I said it's the biggest joke. Biggest joke as far as I was concerned. But anyway, that's where I was on Pesant. And what we tried to do in this book that you're holding up is to absolutely talk about the things he did that were positive and helpful, but we then focused on the things that had not been done, that needed to be done. And this was handed to Carol Johnson when she came to be superintendent of schools.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah.
And she appreciated it. She appreciated it very much because she told me for her, she had parts of the book underlined and she carried it with her everywhere she went. I said, really? She said, yeah. Well, she also appreciated the fact that I got the Boston Children's Chorus to come together with the Boston BSO Gospel Choir and hold a big concert and to welcome her to Boston. And she was thrilled.
Wow, that's really
It was at the big church in Copley Square.
Yeah. Trinity. Yeah.
At Trinity Church. And there were like 900 people who showed up. And the thing that was wonderful is when she got up to speak after all of the laudatory things, and she said, let me lead you in this song. Because I didn't realize she was a singer and had used to get her background. And she led us in this little light of mine. And this whole audience of 900 people just went wild. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to her. How do we welcome the new superintendent to Boston? And we did it with a concert that she loved. And that started my connection with her.
That was quite a feat of showmanship.
Yep.
Of course,
Yep.
the Boston Children's Chorus was quite an achievement too. One of your many organizations. I remember the trip to Chicago where we saw the Chicago Children's Chorus. And I think about 10 minutes after we got back, you were on the phone putting together the Boston Children's Chorus.
Well, it had started. It had started before that. Well, I saw the Chicago Children's Choir sing at a city national convention in June of 2001. I knew nothing about this choir, and they came onto the stage. Very diverse, high school, junior high school kids, and they sang at a level of excellence that blew me away. And I said, oh my goodness, this is the model I've been looking for. Because I've tried to find ways to integrate kids across the divides of race, ethnicity, social class, sexual orientation, and not very successfully. And I said, this looks like the model. And then I went to Chicago 2 weeks later. Tell me all about how you did this. And I said, I don't know if we can do. I can pull this off in Boston, but if I do, would you agree to come and give a concert at Jordan Hall so that Boston can see what it is we can build and how valuable it would be? And they said, yeah, we could do that. Like Martin Luther King weekend is like a three-day weekend, and we could come on that weekend if you ultimately pull it off. So we did.
Wow. Who paid for that?
I had to raise money.
Yeah. Well, who'd you get it from?
I went everywhere. I went foundations, corporations, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In fact, it cost me only $11,000 to bring the whole choir and the staff in.
Jeez, that's a bargain.
Oh, okay. I got a bargain. Yeah. Yeah. I went to, I think it was American Express, who also was the big, with the BSOs, Keith Lockhart's. They did all their travel. And and they got us to give us
Uh-huh.
a big break.
Yeah.
But we had to put up their staff and
Yeah.
all and their kids who came
Yeah.
were in home stays.
That's a lot of kids. Yeah.
A lot of kids. But what was great about it was these kids were telling the kids they were staying with what they do for rehearsals, where do they go, why it was important. So it was really,
Wow.
it was really great. So anyway, so I finally got the
Incredible.
New England Conservatory to agree to be a partner with us and to give us Jordan Hall free on Martin Luther King Day. Okay. And then I said, look, I don't know anything about music. Okay. So would you have your faculty play a role in helping us select the artistic director who for the chorus? And so we got a group of folk kids to sing for candidates who came in to be artistic director. And that's how we got Darren Daly to be the first person who had to come in from North Carolina. But we had to give him a 3-year contract. So he's not coming in here without a contract for 3 years, picking himself up from North Carolina. So I go to the Bar Foundation. I said, look, I need money to bring this man in for 3 years. Would you give me $300,000? And they did.
Another bargain.
But the big thing that also helped was that I decided to put together a festival chorus for the Bunker Hill Bridge celebration. Okay, celebration of the Bunker Hill Bridge. I went to Matt Amarello, who was the head of the Turnpike Authority, and said, we'd like to use the whole celebration of the bridge as a way to promote music. And he said, I can't, I don't have any. The Jewish community is going to determine really what the program is. The bridge is named after Sachem Bunker Hill Bridge.
Yeah.
After Sachem. And they're gonna have. I said, all we want to do is be at the table, okay? So we were at the table, and the Jewish leadership basically tells us, what you have in mind is not what we think of when we're going to do this celebration, okay? And I said, really? And they could see I was pretty upset. So they finally said, okay, you can have your chorus sing at the progression as people progress into the ceremony and as they regress, but they're not going to be singing in the middle of the program. And I'm saying, oh, really? I go back to the choral conductors from all the different choruses that I put together, 180 kids, and they're saying, they're insulting. They're insulting us. Oh, I'm out of here. I'm not going to do that. I said, wait a minute. Ho. Wait a minute now. We can make something happen out of this thing. Okay. So what happened was that because of these kids were seen, there were 180 of them, and they sang and 5 of the major television stations carried it. They were seen all over the place. And then people started calling me saying, are you really going to start a children's chorus? Is this are you on the way to start a children's chorus? Can we give you some money? I never had anybody offer me money unsolicited for any program I was doing. So people started sending me money. I had no place to put it because we weren't even incorporated. Okay, so the money went to Paul Guzzi at the Chamber of Commerce to hold in his his 501c3 operation that he had, mechanism he had, until we were incorporated and had a staff and all the rest. Okay, but Matt Amarello, who was the head of the Turnpike Authority, who I initially went to with Paul Guzzi, said to me, look, can you do something? Could you you really could put a chorus together like this? I said, yeah, we can do it. He said, well, I can give you $50,000 to do it. I said, how can you, the Turnpike Authority, give me $50,000 for a children's chorus to sing at the Sachem Bridge? He said, don't worry about that. We have a pot of money for promotion, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I've watched you for a long time. He says, I'm a fan. You don't know that. So you got $50,000. If you can do it, you got $50,000. So I had $50,000 to match the money that I got from the Bar Foundation. So that's how that whole thing's done. But he used to come to our concerts, by the way.
That's a very interesting story. I would never have connected Matt Amarello to the children's chorus.
He loved it.
That's a great story. So so you're not just an education advocate and a civil rights advocate. You're also a musical impresario.
Oh, no. No.
Huh? Hey,
Saul Hurock, I'm not.
Well, yeah, he was no singer either. I would say you're giving him a run for the money.
What you know, if you're really going to be an authentic leader, is you never know when your number is called, when you are best positioned to step up and do something that needs to be done, even if you don't have all the tools. You find the tool, you find the resource. And so you never know when your number is called. So my number has been called many, many times. And I learned that if your number has been called and you try to say no, and because usually it happens when you're too busy, and you really shouldn't be taking anything else, it's going to haunt you. It's going to haunt you. So you might as well just go ahead and do it. But you got to be very clear that you are the best person positioned and have the social capital to do it. And if that is true, then you better do it.
I think that's our exit line for today. Well, this is again been very informative, remarkable, and surprising. Hubie, thank you. Thanks again. We'll continue next time.
We would like to thank Hubie Jones for joining us this month for the JFYNetWorks podcast. We plan to continue our conversation with him in the near future and hope you'll join us as he continues to share his experiences leading the campaign for racial and economic justice in the city of Boston. If you have any questions or comments, please navigate to our website, jfynet.org, which also features a wealth of commentary, dialogue, and free educational resources, including this monthly podcast, to support all educational communities. Thank you for joining us. For JFYNetWorks, I'm Greg Cunningham.